My child, I want to say something to you today that I need you to actually hear, not pass over, not nod at politely, and then continue forward with the weight still in your arms. I want you to stop for a moment, wherever you are, whatever the day is demanding of you, and let these words reach the place in you that is tired. Not the surface tiredness that a good night's sleep addresses, though you may have that too. The deeper tiredness, the kind that lives underneath everything, that has been present for so long you have almost stopped noticing it as tiredness and have started accepting it as simply the way things are, the permanent background condition of your life. That tiredness is real, and it is telling you something that I want to say out loud on its behalf today. You have carried this long enough. It is time to lay it down. I know what you are carrying. I want to say that first, because the instruction to lay something down is meaningless if the one giving the instruction does not actually understand the weight of what is being held. And I understand the weight. I am not speaking to you from a comfortable distance, observing your burden from outside it and offering detached advice about the wisdom of releasing it. I have been with you in every moment of the carrying. I have seen what it has taken from you. I have watched what it has cost you in energy and in hope and in the particular quality of lightness that belongs to a person who is not managing something heavy in every waking hour. I have seen the years of it, and I am telling you with full knowledge of what you have been through and full awareness of why you have kept holding on, that you have carried this long enough. The season of carrying it, the way you have been carrying it, is complete. What comes next does not require you to hold it in the same way. What comes next requires you to lay it down. I want to spend some time with you in this message on what it actually means to lay something down, because the phrase is familiar and the familiarity has made it feel simple, and it is not simple. To lay something down is not to forget it. It is not to pretend it was not real or that the carrying of it did not cost what it cost. It is not to perform a spiritual transaction in which you declare the burden released and then feel nothing, as though the releasing were a switch that clicks and immediately produces a different interior state. Laying down is not a single moment after which everything is instantly lighter. It is a direction. It is a turning. It is the choosing over and over again in the imperfect repeated texture of actual human life to place what you have been holding into hands that are more capable of holding it than yours are. To stop being the primary load-bearing structure for something that was never designed to be borne by one person alone. To let it be held somewhere else, by someone else, while you recover the use of the hands and the heart and the energy that the carrying has been consuming. And I want to be clear about who those other hands belong to. I am not asking you to lay it down into the ground, into the void, into some spiritual abstraction that might or might not catch what you release. I am asking you to lay it into my hands specifically. I am present. I am here. I am the specific destination for what you have been carrying. And I am not a passive receptacle that holds things inertly once they arrive. I am active. What comes into my hands gets worked with. It gets held, yes, but it also gets attended to, addressed, transformed in ways that could not happen while you were clutching it so tightly that there was no room for anything to change within your grip. The laying down is the beginning of the transformation. And the transformation is what you have been needing, not the management, not the endurance, not the continuing to carry what has been carried long enough, but the actual changing of the thing, the actual redemption of it, the actual movement from burden to something that serves life rather than consuming it. You have been strong for so long. I want to say that plainly, and I want you to receive it, not as flattery, but as observation. The fact that you are still here, still functioning, still reaching toward connection and meaning and the ordinary goods of your life while carrying what you have been carrying is evidence of a remarkable and costly strength. Not the strength that comes from things being easy, the strength that comes from continuing when things are genuinely hard, from getting up in the mornings when the weight was already present before you opened your eyes, from engaging with your relationships and your responsibilities and your days with something available to give when the interior reserves felt depleted. That is not a small thing. I see it. I name it as real. And I'm not asking you to lay down the strength. I'm asking you to let the strength rest, to stop requiring it to perform the function of carrying what I am designed to carry, and to redirect it toward the life I am building for you on the other side of the laying down. This message is for you. If something in you went quiet when you read the first sentence, if something in you recognized the tiredness I named before I finished naming it, if something in your chest moved when you read the words you have carried this long enough, then I am speaking to you specifically. Not generally, not to everyone who might happen upon these words. To you, in the specific weight of your specific carrying, with full knowledge of what is in your arms and full intention toward what happens when you finally, mercifully, lay it down. If these words are finding you in a place of real need today, support this ministry through the link given below. Your generosity helps carry this message to others who are standing under the same weight, waiting to hear the same permission. I want to name what you have been carrying, because the instruction to lay something down is easier to receive when the specific thing being named is actually the thing you recognize in your arms. And I want to name several of the burdens that my children carry too long, not as a comprehensive list, but as a series of recognitions, as a way of saying, I see what is in your hands. I know what has made your shoulders curve inward. I understand the specific shape of what you have been holding. Some of you have been carrying responsibility that was never yours to carry. Responsibility that was placed on you early, before you were equipped for it, by adults who were themselves overwhelmed and who leaned on you in ways that reversed the proper order of things. The child who became the emotional support for a parent. The child who managed the household because the adults could not. The child who monitored the atmosphere of the home, sensing the shifts in mood and adjusting their own behavior to keep the peace, who became so fluent in reading other people's emotional states and managing their own accordingly that they never had the chance to simply be a child who was held rather than a child who held. That responsibility, absorbed before you could evaluate whether it was appropriate, has followed you into your adulthood and has continued to express itself in the same pattern, taking on what others cannot or will not carry, monitoring and managing and maintaining, being the strong one, being the reliable one, being the one whose own needs are secondary because there is always something or someone else that needs attending first. You have been carrying that pattern and everything it has demanded of you for a very long time. And I am saying to you, it is time to lay it down. Some of you have been carrying shame. The particular weight of shame is that it does not announce itself clearly. It does not arrive and declare, I am shame, and I am the reason you hold yourself back, the reason you make yourself smaller, the reason you believe that full visibility is dangerous, the reason you have never quite allowed yourself to want things openly, because wanting and not receiving in front of people is unbearable, when shame is the operating interior condition. Shame arrives quietly, and it settles in, and it begins to function like a filter, like a lens through which everything is processed, like a background assumption that colors every interaction and every aspiration and every moment of potential joy with the possibility that it will be taken away or revealed to be undeserved. Shame is heavy. It is one of the heaviest things a person can carry because it is not a single weight but a pervasive atmosphere, not something in the hands so much as something that has seeped into the bones. And I am saying to you, you have been living in that atmosphere long enough. It is time to step out of it. Some of you have been carrying grief that was never properly completed. Loss that happened and was acknowledged briefly, and then life required you to move forward before the moving forward was genuinely available to you. The death of someone whose absence you are still adjusting to years later. The end of a relationship that left a space that has not been filled and that you have been navigating around rather than through. The loss of a dream, a version of your life that you built toward and that did not come to be. A future self that was vivid in your imagination and that you have been quietly mourning without anyone around you fully knowing that the mourning is still happening. Grief that has nowhere to go becomes weight. It settles into the body and the mood and the chronic low-level sadness that you have accepted as simply your baseline, not knowing that what you have accepted as your nature is actually your grief, looking for a place to complete itself. I am saying to you, bring me the grief. Let it finish in my presence what it could not finish in the spaces available to it before now. Some of you have been carrying the weight of other people's opinions, the voices that told you what you were and were not capable of, what you should and should not want, who you were and were not allowed to be. The parent whose disappointment in you was communicated so consistently that you internalized it and began to disappoint yourself in advance of their disappointment. The peer whose rejection in a formative season taught you that belonging was conditional on performance. The community whose spoken or unspoken standards you have been measuring yourself against for years, perpetually finding yourself slightly deficient, perpetually adjusting and editing and presenting a version of yourself that you hope will pass the inspection. Those voices are not your voice. Those standards are not my standards for you. And the weight of trying to satisfy them has been taking from you what was never theirs to take. I am saying to you, lay it down. Their verdict is not the verdict that stands. Some of you have been carrying unforgiveness. And I want to say this carefully, not with the urgency of a spiritual obligation, but with the tenderness of someone who understands why the unforgiveness has been held. Unforgiveness is heavy. It takes significant interior energy to maintain. It requires keeping the account, keeping the record, keeping the specific inventory of what was done and what was not done, and what was said and what was never said, and what was never returned. And the person whose account you are keeping may be entirely unaware that you are keeping it, may be living their life without the weight that you are carrying on their behalf. The unforgiveness is not hurting them the way it is hurting you. And I am saying to you, lay it down, not for their sake, for yours. Release the account to me. Let me be the keeper of justice while you recover the energy that the keeping has been consuming. Some of you have been carrying fear, a specific fear or a collection of fears that has been shaping your choices and limiting your territory and keeping you inside a smaller life than the one I have for you. The fear of failure that has kept you from attempting. The fear of rejection that has kept you from reaching. The fear of loss that has kept you from fully arriving in what you have, because arriving fully in something means it can be fully taken, and that risk has felt too great. Fear, worn long enough, stops feeling like fear and starts feeling like wisdom, like common sense, like simply knowing how the world works. And I am saying to you, that is not wisdom. That is the fear talking, and the fear has had enough of your life. It is time to lay it down. I want to speak now about why you have kept carrying it, because understanding the reasons is not weakness and is not an excuse. It is the honest work of seeing clearly what has been operating in you, and clear seeing is always the first step toward genuine change. You have not been carrying this because you are spiritually deficient or because you lack the faith required for release. You have been carrying it because there are real and understandable reasons why the carrying has continued. And I want to name those reasons with the same honesty and care with which I named what is being carried, so that you can look at them directly rather than around them. The first reason you have kept carrying it is that you were never shown how to put it down. The people who formed you, the people who shaped your understanding of how life works and how to navigate difficulty and what to do when things become too heavy, those people were themselves carrying things they did not know how to release. They carried with endurance, and they carried with silence, and they carried with a kind of stoic continuation that looks like strength from the outside and is often simply the absence of any available alternative. And you learned from them. You learned that you carry what comes your way. You learn to manage it. You learn to function despite it. You do not lay it down because laying it down was never modeled, never demonstrated, never presented as a real and available option for someone like you in circumstances like yours. The carrying was the inheritance, and I want to honor the faithfulness with which you have carried, while also saying that the inheritance can be changed, that what was passed down to you does not have to be passed forward by you, that there is a different way of engaging with the weight of life that I am making available to you now. The second reason you have kept carrying it is that some part of you believes that the carrying is what is holding things together, that if you put it down, something will collapse. Something in the relational world or the family structure or the household or the community that depends, however invisibly, on your continued holding of it. You have been the one who manages, and the management has become so ingrained in the structure of the lives around you that stepping back from it feels like an act of harm, like a betrayal of the people who have come to rely on you, being the one who holds what no one else is holding. And so you continue. You carry what is yours and what has been handed to you and what is defaulted to you because no one else was available or willing. And you do not complain about it because complaining feels like weakness, and you do not ask for help because asking for help feels like a burden, and you do not lay it down because the things that are resting on your holding feel too fragile to survive the putting down. I want to say to you, the things that are genuinely mine to sustain will be sustained without your holding of them, and the things that would collapse without your carrying of them may need to collapse, may need to come to their natural resting point, so that something more honest and more sustainable can be built in their place. The third reason you have kept carrying it is exhaustion. Genuine, deep, bone-level exhaustion that has paradoxically made the laying down more difficult rather than less, because the kind of tired you are is not the kind of tired that produces surrender. It is the kind of tired that produces a narrowing, a reduction of the available imagination, a state in which the options visible to you shrink to the few that are most familiar, and the most familiar option is always to continue carrying, because continuing is what you have always done. And change, even change toward relief, requires an energy that the exhaustion has depleted. You are too tired to put it down. I understand that, and I want to say to you, that I am not asking you to produce the energy required to lay it down from your own depleted reserves. I am asking you to let me provide the energy, to let the releasing be something I assist with, rather than something you accomplish through your own effort. You do not have to find the strength to open your hands. You only have to be willing for your hands to be opened. The fourth reason you have kept carrying it is that the carrying has given you a sense of purpose. When what you carry is a responsibility for others, when the weight in your arms is the welfare of people you love or the maintenance of something that matters, the carrying is not only a burden, it is also an identity. I am the one who holds this together. I am the one who keeps watch. I am the one without whom things would fall apart, and there is something in that identity that meets a genuine human need, the need to matter, the need to be necessary, the need to have a clear and visible function in the lives of the people around you. I am not dismissing that need. It is real and it is legitimate, but I am asking you to consider whether the specific form in which that need is currently being met through the exhausting and unsustainable carrying of things that were not designed to be carried by one person is the best available form, or whether there is a different way to matter, a different way to be necessary, that does not require you to hold what I am asking you to lay down. The fifth reason you have kept carrying it is simply habit, not a weak or shameful habit, a deeply grooved one, worn into the interior by years of repetition, a path so familiar that you take it automatically, without deciding, without choosing, simply because it is the path your feet know. Every morning, the weight is there, and you pick it up, not because you have decided to pick it up, but because picking it up is what mornings have always looked like. And the alternative, the morning in which you consciously choose not to resume the carrying, is so outside the groove of what is familiar that it does not present itself as a real option without significant and sustained effort to see it. Habits of carrying are among the most persistent habits there are, because they are reinforced not only by repetition, but by the sense of responsibility and love and identity that the carrying carries alongside the weight itself. Breaking the habit of carrying does not happen once. It happens in the daily repeated choosing of a different response to the morning weight, a choosing that is difficult at first and gradually becomes its own groove, its own familiar path, worn not by years of carrying, but by the accumulating practice of laying down. I am not asking you to overcome all of these reasons in a single moment. I am asking you to see them clearly, to bring them with you into the conversation we are having, and to let me speak into each of them the specific truth that it needs. The reasons you have kept carrying are real, and they are not insurmountable, and I am the one who can address them at their root. I want to speak honestly now about what the continued carrying is costing you, because sometimes the willingness to lay something down requires first seeing clearly what the holding on is actually taking. We have a tendency to measure the cost of change, to count what we would lose by releasing what we are holding, without equally measuring the ongoing cost of the holding itself. And the holding has a cost. It has been taking things from you quietly and consistently for a long time, and I want to name what those things are, not to make you feel worse about a situation you did not choose, but because clear-eyed accounting of what the carrying is costing you is part of what makes the laying down feel not only possible, but necessary. The carrying is costing you your presence. This is perhaps the most significant and least visible cost, because presence is not something you notice losing gradually. You simply find yourself, over time, less fully arrived in the moments of your actual life, less able to be genuinely in a conversation without some part of your attention being elsewhere, occupied with what you are carrying, running the background calculations of management and maintenance and vigilance that the carrying requires, less able to be fully in a moment of beauty or joy or connection without the weight pulling some portion of your awareness back toward itself. The people who love you have sensed this, even when they could not name it. They have felt the glass, the slight distance, the quality of someone who is physically present and partially elsewhere. And you have sensed it too, the feeling of watching your own life from a slight remove rather than living fully inside it, the sense that something is always between you and the full experience of what is happening around you, that something is the weight. And it is taking your presence as the ongoing price of its being held. The carrying is costing you your creativity. The energy that would be available for curiosity and imagination, and the generative work of building and creating and imagining what is possible, that energy is being consumed by the weight. Creativity requires a certain quality of interior spaciousness, a freedom to wander and explore and make unexpected connections. That is not available when the majority of the interior bandwidth is occupied with management. The thing you used to love doing, that you do not have the energy for anymore. The idea that used to light something up in you that now feels like a luxury you cannot afford. The sense that your inner life has become narrower and more functional and less playful than it used to be. That narrowing is partly the weight, and the weight is not worth what it is taking from the part of you that was made to create and dream and build. The carrying is costing you your relationships, not necessarily in visible or dramatic ways, not necessarily through arguments or endings or the obvious signs of relational difficulty, but in the quiet ways that accumulated carrying makes genuine intimacy difficult. The quality of presence we just named means that the people you love are not always getting the full version of you, the version that is genuinely curious about them, and genuinely available to them, and genuinely able to receive what they offer without the weight intercepting it. The people who need your help are getting the manager version of you, the strong and competent and reliable version, but not always the tender version, not always the vulnerable version, not always the version that can admit to needing something in return. The carrying has trained you out of the kind of mutual exchange that the deepest relationships require, and the people who love you most are sometimes loving a version of you that is more available to them than you actually are. The carrying is costing you your body. The body that has been holding the weight in its shoulders and its jaw and its chest and its stomach. The body that runs at a higher baseline level of tension than it was designed for. The body that has been asked to perform as though it were not carrying what it is carrying, that body is paying. In fatigue, in the symptoms that have no clear physical origin, in the sleep that does not fully restore because the guard never fully comes down, in the aging that happens faster in a body under chronic stress than in a body that is genuinely at rest. I made your body as a gift for the living of your life, not as a structural support system for what you are carrying. And the body is telling you, in the language of symptoms and tiredness and tension, what I am telling you, in the language of these words: this is too much, and it has been too much for too long, and something needs to change. The carrying is costing you your faith, not dramatically, not in the form of a declared abandonment of belief, but in the subtle erosion that happens when a person has been asking me to help them carry something for a long time, and the weight has not lifted, when prayer has felt like sending messages into silence, when the spiritual life has become another obligation in the schedule of the carrying rather than the source of replenishment and genuine connection it was designed to be. The weight has gotten between you and me in ways you may not have fully named, coloring your experience of prayer and worship and the reading of Scripture with the tired quality of someone who is going through motions, while the real, pressing, unresolved interior reality waits just beneath the surface of everything. I have not moved, but the weight has made it harder to feel me moving. And that cost, the cost to your spiritual life, to the quality of your connection with me, is perhaps the one I grieve most directly. The carrying is costing you your future. Every day that the weight consumes the energy and the presence and the creativity and the relational capacity that belong to the life I have for you is a day of that life that is not being fully lived. I want to say that carefully because I do not want it to produce guilt or the sense that you have been wasting your life. You have not been wasting it. You have been carrying what came to you and managing as faithfully as you knew how. But there is a future available to you that the carrying is preventing, a life that is waiting on the other side of the laying down, and every day that the laying down is deferred is a day that life is not yet being lived. The cost is real, and knowing the cost is part of what I am giving you today, to add to the weight of the reasons why it is finally, truly, time to lay it down. I want to give you something now that you may not realize you have been waiting for. I want to give you permission, explicit, deliberate, personally spoken permission to lay down what you have been carrying. Because for many of my children, the laying down has been delayed, not primarily by inability, but by the absence of permission, by the sense that putting it down requires authorization from somewhere, from someone with the standing, to declare that enough has been enough and that the carrying can stop. And I have that standing. I am the one who knows what you have been given to carry and what you have taken on beyond that, and what has been placed on you without your consent. And I am the one who can look at the full inventory of what is in your arms and say with complete authority, you have done enough. You have held this long enough. You have my full permission to lay it down. I give you permission to stop being the one who holds everything together. The person who has been the structural support of their family or their community or their relationships, who has been managing and maintaining and monitoring so that the people around them do not have to, that person has been performing a function that was never meant to be permanent and was never meant to be solitary. I give you permission to step back from that function, to let the systems and the people that have been depending on your carrying develop their own capacity to carry, or to discover their own dependence on me rather than their dependence on you. You are not the load-bearing wall of other people's lives. That is my role. And I am not asking you to abandon the people you love. I am asking you to stop standing between them and me by being the one who absorbs everything so that they never have to bring it to me themselves. I give you permission to rest. Full, genuine, unhurried rest. Not the rest that is always slightly provisional. Always one crisis away from being interrupted, always held with the awareness that the weight is still there waiting for you on the other side of it. The rest that comes from actually laying the weight down, from the interior quieting that follows when something that has been demanding constant attention is no longer in your hands. The rest that the body and the mind and the spirit have been needing for a very long time. You do not have to earn rest by first finishing everything. You do not have to wait until the carrying is complete before you are allowed to stop. The carrying is not going to be complete on its own terms. You will carry until you choose to stop, or until the weight forces you to stop in ways that are far less graceful than the choosing. I am asking you to choose. I am giving you permission to choose. Rest is available to you now, not after. Now. I give you permission to receive help. This one may be harder than it sounds, because the person who has been the helper, who has organized their relational world around being the one with capacity, the one who is asked rather than the one who asks, the one who gives rather than the one who receives, that person has often lost the ability to receive without discomfort, without the sense of imbalance, without the impulse to immediately return what is offered so that the accounts are equal again. I give you permission to let people help you, to name what you need, to allow someone else to be the strong one for a season, to be on the receiving end of care without managing the care, without directing it, without making it easier on the person offering it so that they feel less inconvenienced by your need. You are allowed to have needs. You are allowed to let them be met. That is not weakness. That is the honest acknowledgement of what you actually are, which is a person, fully human, finite in your resources, designed for mutual dependence rather than isolated self-sufficiency. I give you permission to stop carrying what was never yours to carry in the first place. The things that were placed on you without your consent, the responsibilities that defaulted to you because no one else was available, the emotional weight of other people's unprocessed pain that seeped into you through proximity and love and the absence of adequate protection, the expectations and the obligations and the roles that were assigned to you rather than chosen by you. You did not choose all of what you are carrying. Some of it arrived before you had the capacity to evaluate it. Some of it was given to you by people who had no right to give it. You received it because that is what you did, because receiving was safer than refusing, because refusing had consequences that the carrying did not, because you are young or vulnerable or too committed to the people involved to say no to what they needed from you. That receiving was not a contract. You did not agree to carry those things permanently, and I give you permission to set them down. I give you permission to grieve what the carrying has cost you, not in the spirit of regret or resentment, but in the spirit of honest acknowledgement. You have lost things. The years of presence that were given to the weight rather than to the life. The relationships that were managed rather than inhabited. The dreams that were deferred because the carrying consumed what the dreams required. The version of yourself that you might have been without the weight that shaped you. Those losses are real and they deserve to be felt. And feeling them is not a failure to be grateful for what you have. It is the honest honoring of what was taken and what will not return. And the honest honoring of loss is what allows it to be processed and released, rather than stored indefinitely in the place where it has been pressing against everything else. And I give you permission to believe that what comes after the laying down is good. Not just neutral, not just the absence of the weight, but genuinely good, specifically good, worth arriving at. The fear that life without the carrying will feel purposeless or empty or somehow less than what you have known is a fear. I want to address directly with this permission. I have prepared something for the hands that are freed by the laying down. Not nothing. Something that fits the real shape of who you are rather than the shape of who you became in response to what you were carrying. Trust that. Let that permission be part of what opens your hands. What is coming after is good. I give you my word. I want to speak about what happens when you actually lay it down, what I do with what you release, what the burden looks like from my side of the exchange, because understanding what you are laying it into may help you trust the laying. You are not releasing it into a void. You are not setting it down on the ground where it will simply sit waiting for you to pick it back up. You are placing it into hands that are fundamentally different from yours, and the difference matters enormously for what happens to the burden once it arrives with me. When you carry something, you carry it primarily through effort, through the sustained application of your own strength against the weight of it, through the daily expenditure of the energy that the holding requires, through the vigilance and the management and the active resistance to the weight's pressure downward. Human carrying is effortful by nature because human beings are finite, and the things we carry are often not proportioned to our finitude. They press against the limits of what we can hold, and the pressing is what produces the exhaustion we have been talking about, the gradual depletion that comes from sustained effort against sustained weight. When I carry something, I do not carry it through effort in the way you do, not because I am indifferent to it, or because it requires no attention, but because my capacity is not a fixed resource that is depleted by the carrying. I do not grow tired of what I hold. I do not have a threshold beyond which the weight becomes too much and the holding becomes impossible. What you place in my hands does not press against the limits of my capacity, because my capacity is not limited in the way yours is. I can hold what you have been holding indefinitely, with full attention, with full care, without the weight diminishing what is available for everything else. The carrying that has been consuming you is, for me, simply presence with what is present. I am with it. I hold it. And the holding costs me nothing that is not replenished immediately, which means that what I carry completely and continuously without the degradation that your carrying has produced. But here is what I want you to understand about the difference beyond the capacity question. When something is in your hands, it tends to stay the same. You hold it, you manage it, you carry it from one day to the next, but it does not change in your grip. The weight that was there last year is the same weight this year. The burden that came to you unchanged remains. Unchanged because holding is not transforming. It is simply holding. When something is in my hands, it does not stay the same. I do not simply hold things inertly. I work with what comes to me. I attend to it. I bring my nature to bear on it, and my nature is restorative, redemptive, creative, oriented always toward what the thing was always meant to be, rather than what it has become through damage and time. The grief that you have been holding does not stay grief in my hands. The shame does not stay shame. The fear does not stay fear. The anger does not stay anger. They become things in the process of being transformed, things I am working with, things whose ending is something other than what they were when they arrived. The transformation begins the moment you release them, and the transformation is something that your holding was preventing by keeping the burden in a place where my hands could not fully reach it. I also want to say something about my understanding of what you are carrying, because there is a quality to the understanding with which I receive what you release that is different from the quality of any human receiving. When you lay something down with me, you are not simply transferring a burden to a carrier who is stronger, but who holds it with the same kind of generic attention that a porter holds a bag. I receive what you bring with full knowledge of its history, full understanding of what it contains, full awareness of what it has cost you and what it came from and what it means to the specific person releasing it. I receive your grief with knowledge of every specific loss that contributed to it. I receive your shame with full awareness of the false messages that installed it and the real vulnerability that it has been protecting. I receive your fear with precise understanding of what the fear is actually guarding against and whether the guard is still needed. I receive the carrying of the responsibility that was not yours with indignation on your behalf, with clear-eyed recognition of what was placed on you without right. My receiving is not passive or generic. It is intimate and specific and entirely oriented toward the particular person who is releasing the particular burden they have been carrying. And then there is the rest that becomes available to you when what has been in your hands is in mine. I want to speak about this rest specifically because it is one of my primary desires for you in this season. The rest I offer is not the rest of the person who has finished all their work. It is the rest of the person who has released their work into capable hands. The difference is significant. Finishing all the work is not available to you. There will always be more. But releasing the specific burden you have been carrying, the weight that has been pressing on you in ways that have nothing to do with the ordinary demands of ordinary life, that releasing produces a quality of rest that is not contingent on everything being resolved. You can rest while things are still in process. You can rest while the transformation is happening in my hands. You can rest while what I am building is still being built. The rest is available now, not after the completion of everything, but now in the act of releasing, in the opening of the hands, in the choosing to let what I am capable of holding be held by me. Come to me, lay it down, and let me give you what has been unavailable to you for as long as you have been carrying what was never designed for your hands alone. Support this ministry through the link given below. Your generosity carries these words to others who are standing under the same weight, waiting to hear the same invitation to rest. I want to talk about the specific act of laying down, what it actually looks like in the practical experience of a real person on a real day, because I do not want this invitation to remain in the realm of the beautiful and the abstract without giving you something concrete to do with it. The laying down I am describing is not a metaphor that you admire and then set aside. It is a real action with real interior mechanics, and I want to walk you through what those mechanics look like so that when you attempt it, you recognize the experience rather than dismissing it as insufficient because it did not arrive in the form you expected. The first thing the laying down requires is the moment of stopping. Before you can put something down, you have to stop moving with it. And most people who carry heavy things for a long time are in perpetual motion with their burden, because stillness brings the full weight of it into awareness in a way that movement partially distributes. As long as you are doing the next thing, managing the next situation, addressing the next demand, the weight is present, but it is mixed with activity, and the activity provides a kind of buffer. When you stop, the weight is simply there, undiluted by anything else, and you feel it more fully than you do when you are moving. This is why rest is difficult for the person who carries too much. Not because they do not want rest, but because rest brings the full weight into focus, and the full weight is harder to feel than the managed weight. But the stopping is necessary. You cannot lay something down while you are still walking with it. The laying down begins with the stopping, with the deliberate choosing to be still long enough for the full reality of what you are carrying to be present with you without the buffer of activity around it. The second thing the laying down requires is the naming. When you stop and the weight is fully present, give it a name. Not necessarily a precise clinical name, simply an honest one. I am carrying grief about what happened in that relationship. I am carrying shame about who I have been in that season. I am carrying fear about what is coming and whether I will be enough for it. I am carrying responsibility for people who have not learned to carry themselves. I am carrying anger about what was done to me that I have never fully expressed. Whatever is there, name it. The naming is not the same as the resolving. You are not required to have an answer to what you name. You are only required to be honest about what is present. The naming brings the weight from the background into the foreground, from the ambient atmosphere of the carrying into the specific, tangible form of a thing that can be handed over, and things that have been named can be given more easily than things that remain formless and atmospheric. The third thing the laying down requires is the address. You turn toward me, not in any particular physical posture, not with any particular set of words, but with the interior turning that is the essential movement of prayer, the reorientation of the attention from the weight itself to the one you are handing it to. And you say something. It does not have to be eloquent. It does not have to be theologically precise. It can be as simple as, I have been carrying this and I cannot carry it anymore and I am giving it to you. Or, I do not know how to put this down, but I want to. Help me open my hands. Or even simpler, here, just here. The bringing of the named thing and the turning toward me and the extending of what is in your hands in my direction. That is the prayer. That is the laying down. It is not a formula. It is a real act of the real will toward a real person, and I receive it as exactly that. The fourth thing the laying down requires is the releasing of the grip. This is the hardest part, not because it requires great strength, but because the grip has been so long established that opening the hand feels dangerous even when the danger is imaginary. The hands that have been holding something for years do not simply relax in a single moment of willing it to be so. They may need to be consciously relaxed, deliberately opened, the fingers uncurled one at a time through a gentle and patient attending to the physical sensation of holding and then of releasing. If it is helpful, do this literally. Physically open your hands as you bring what you are carrying to me. Let the gesture of the body mirror and support the gesture of the interior. Let the physical opening of the hands be the physical enactment of what you are choosing in the spirit. It is not silly. It is the embodiment of a real decision. And the body's participation in the releasing supports the spirit's participation in the same way that the body's participation in worship supports the spirit's worship. The fifth thing is the waiting. After the naming and the turning and the releasing of the grip, there is a moment of waiting in which you are available to receive what comes back, which is not nothing. I have described in other parts of this message what I do with what you bring me. Here I want to say simply, after the laying down, stay for a moment. Do not immediately fill the space with the next activity, the next demand, the next resumption of the carrying. Let the moment of having laid it down be a moment. Breathe in the space that the releasing created. Notice whether anything shifts in the interior, however subtly, however quietly. A slight easing, a fractional reduction in the weight, a quality of something that might be peace beginning at the edges of what has been tense. That noticing is important. It is the beginning of the body and the spirit registering that something real has happened, that the carrying is no longer entirely yours, that something has changed in the interior, even if the exterior circumstances remain the same. Let that noticing be received. Let it be the first small evidence that the laying down was real and that what I do with what you bring me is already beginning. I want to speak about what happens after the laying down, specifically about the experience that most people have in the hours and days following a genuine act of release. Because if I do not describe it, you may be blindsided by it and interpret it incorrectly and use it as evidence that the laying down did not work or was not real. The experience I am describing is this: you will reach for it again. Not necessarily consciously, not necessarily as a deliberate choice to resume carrying, but the hands that have been holding something for a long time have a muscle memory of the holding, a practiced returning to the familiar weight. And in the hours after you lay it down, they will reach back toward where it was without you fully noticing they are doing it. The mind that has organized itself around the management of what you have been carrying will find itself running the old management processes even after the thing being managed has been released, like a program still running after the file it was processing has been closed. You will catch yourself worrying about the thing you laid down. You will catch yourself planning around it, strategizing about it, checking on it, pulling it back toward yourself to examine it, to make sure it is being handled adequately. And then you will notice what you are doing, and you will feel the familiar frustration of a person who made a sincere decision and then found themselves reversing it without meaning to. I want to tell you in advance that this is not failure. The reaching back is not evidence that the laying down was insincere or insufficient, or that you are incapable of genuine release. It is evidence that the habit of carrying is deeply established, that the neural pathways of the holding are worn deep, and that changing them requires more than a single act of release, however sincere that act was. The laying down is real even when the hands reach back. The decision was real even when the mind resumes its old operations. The releasing was real even when the body and the nervous system, with their own slower learning curves, have not yet fully registered that the carrying has stopped. What you do with the reaching back matters more than the reaching back itself. What I want you to do when you notice that you have reached back for what you laid down is not to condemn yourself or to conclude that you have failed at something that others do more easily or that the laying down was a nice idea that does not work in practice. I want you to simply notice, with gentleness rather than judgment, what is happening. I picked it back up. I am carrying it again, and then to lay it down again, as many times as necessary. The repeated laying down is not a failure of the original laying down. It is the laying down working. It is the process of a new habit forming to replace the old one, the gradual wearing of a new groove in the interior alongside the old groove, until the new groove becomes more familiar than the old one, and the reaching toward release becomes more automatic than the reaching toward carrying. I also want to speak about the guilt that often accompanies the laying down, because many people, when they finally lay down what they have been carrying, feel guilty about the putting down. Guilty that they are no longer holding what they were holding. Guilty toward the people who depended on their holding. Guilty, sometimes, toward me, as though the laying down of a burden represents some failure of faithfulness, as though a truly devoted person would have found the strength to keep carrying rather than needing to put it down. I want to address this guilt directly and plainly. The laying down of what was not designed to be permanently carried by you is not an act of faithlessness. It is an act of alignment. It is the correcting of something that was out of order, the returning of what belongs in my hands to my hands, the honest acknowledgement of your own finitude, and the trusting of my sufficiency to hold what your finitude cannot sustain. There is no guilt owed for that alignment. It is not a failure of love toward the people who have been depending on your carrying. It is the beginning of a more honest and more sustainable form of love, one that is not organized around your exhaustion, but around my provision. And I want to speak about the emptiness, the feeling that sometimes follows the laying down of something that has been carried for a long time is not relief alone. It is relief mixed with a strange disorientation, a sense of not quite knowing what to do with hands that are no longer full, a quiet that feels unfamiliar and slightly unsettling after the constant noise of the carrying. You have been organized around the weight for so long that the absence of it produces a kind of interior rearranging, a searching for what is supposed to fill the space that the burden occupied. This emptiness is not permanent, and it is not a signal that something is wrong. It is the space that has been created for what I am building, the necessary clearing that precedes new construction. Do not rush to fill it with another weight. Do not reach for the next thing to carry simply because carrying is what you know. Let the emptiness be present. Let the unfamiliar quiet have its season. Boy! And let me begin to fill the space not with another burden, but with what I have been preparing for the hands that are finally free. The rest, when it comes, will feel unfamiliar at first. Not because it is the wrong thing, but because it is the right thing after so long without it. And the right thing can feel strange when you are not accustomed to it. Let yourself be strange in the rest. Let yourself be a person who does not know quite how to inhabit the lightness yet, who is learning, who is adjusting, who is discovering gradually what life feels like when the primary interior occupation is not the management of the weight. That learning is available to you. The adjustment is available to you. The discovery of what you are like when you are not primarily defined by what you carry is one of the most significant and most worthwhile discoveries of the healed life. I am waiting on the other side of the laying down to show you who you are without it. And what I will show you is someone worth meeting. I want to speak specifically about the people you are carrying, because for many of my children, the heaviest weight in their arms is not an abstract burden, but a specific person or set of people whose well-being they have taken personal responsibility for in a way that goes beyond love into something that is costing them more than love should cost. The parent who lies awake worrying about an adult child who is making choices the parent cannot control. The spouse who has been managing their partner's emotional world, absorbing what spills over, smoothing what is jagged, maintaining the relational temperature so that peace is preserved at the expense of honesty. The child who has never stopped trying to fix or satisfy or earn the approval of a parent who may be genuinely incapable of providing what is sought. The friend who has organized their availability around someone else's crisis, who has been on call for another person's pain for so long that they have stopped registering their own. The person who carries the accumulated worry of every relationship they hold, who is in some interior corner of themselves, constantly monitoring the state of everyone they love, taking the temperature of each connection, anticipating what might go wrong, and trying to prevent it before it does. This carrying of people is one of the most difficult things to lay down because it does not feel like a burden. It feels like love. And in many ways, it is love. Genuine and real and coming from a place of deep care. But there is a form that love takes when it is mixed with anxiety, when it is organized around the need to control outcomes for the people we care about. That is no longer purely love. It is love plus fear. Love plus the inability to tolerate uncertainty about the well-being of those who matter to you. Love plus the unconscious belief that if something bad happens to someone you are supposed to be watching over, it will be your failure, your inadequacy, your love that was insufficient. And that form of love, however real the love within it, has become a weight that is harming the one carrying it, without necessarily serving the ones being carried. Here is what I want to say about the people you are carrying. They are mine before they are yours. The adult child you cannot stop worrying about is someone I knew before you did. Someone I love with a completeness that your love, real as it is, cannot match. Someone whose life is in my hands in a way that it has never been fully in yours, however tightly you have been holding it. The partner whose emotional state you have been managing is someone I am working with in ways that do not require your management of them, that may actually be prevented by your management of them, because the pressure of someone else's management can prevent the very growth that would come from a person learning to bring their own weight to me. The parent whose approval you have been seeking is someone with their own wounds and their own relationship with me that is between them and me. Not a problem you are responsible for solving through sufficient performance of love and adequacy. I am not asking you to stop loving these people. I am asking you to love them differently, to love them in the way that trusts me with them, rather than the way that substitutes your vigilance for my care. Yes, to love them in the way that allows them to be in my hands, rather than the way that keeps them in yours, because your hands feel safer to you than the uncertainty of trusting me with what matters most to you. The releasing of the people you carry does not mean releasing the love. It means releasing the anxiety that has wrapped itself around the love. It means letting the love be love again, clean and genuine, and not contaminated by the fear of what will happen to them if you stop watching, if you stop managing, if you stop holding their lives in the constant surveillance of your worry. There is also something I want to say about what this releasing makes possible for the people you have been carrying. The ones you love who have been under the cover of your managing, who have been buffered from the natural consequences of their own choices by your interventions, who have been able to avoid the direct encounter with me that difficulty and limitation and unmanaged pain would have brought them to, because you have been absorbing what would have reached them. Those people are not being served by your caring as much as you believe. The direct encounter with me that comes through unmanaged difficulty is one of the primary pathways through which growth happens, through which genuine faith is built, through which people discover what they are capable of, and who they can depend on when the person who has been managing everything for them is not available to do so. Your laying down of the caring for them may be one of the most loving things you ever do, because it may be what finally brings them to me. I know that is a difficult thing to receive. I know the love that drives the caring is real, and the fear beneath it is real, and the thought of stepping back from the management feels like an abandonment of what love requires. I am not asking you to abandon anyone. I am asking you to release them from your hands into mine. I am asking you to practice the specific act of consciously placing each person you carry into my hands by name with deliberate intention, saying, I love this person, and I cannot carry them. They are yours. I trust you with them. That prayer, repeated as often as the anxiety resurfaces, as often as the old management impulse reaches for them again, is the beginning of a different kind of love. Not a smaller love, a larger one. One that trusts me enough to release what you cannot control into the hands of the one who can. Support this ministry through the link given below. These words are reaching people who are tired of carrying what love was never meant to require of them, and your support sends them further. I want to talk about rest now, not as a concept to be understood, but as a reality to be entered. Because rest is what becomes available when what you have been carrying is finally laid down, and I want you to know what to expect of it, so that when it begins to arrive, you can receive it rather than resist it or dismiss it or let the unfamiliarity of it send you reaching back for the familiar weight. The rest I am offering you is not the rest of vacation, not the rest of a weekend without obligations, not the rest that comes from a temporary reduction in the demands of your schedule. Those forms of rest are real and good, and I do not diminish them. But what I am offering goes deeper than the relief of circumstances temporarily changing. I am offering the rest of a person who has put down what has been pressing them. The interior quieting that happens when the primary occupation of the interior shifts from the management of the burden to the receiving of what I have for the hands that are free. This rest begins in the body. I want to start there because the body is often where the first signs of it appear, and recognizing them as rest rather than as some unusual or suspicious sensation is part of receiving it. The shoulders begin to descend from where they have been living, slightly raised against the weight, slightly braced for the next thing. The jaw, which has been carrying the tension of the carrying in its clenching, begins to soften. The chest, which has been slightly contracted around the weight of what has been held there, begins to open, to allow breath that goes deeper than the shallow breathing that anxiety and vigilance require. These physical shifts are not insignificant. They are the body beginning to register the message that the interior is sending. Something has changed. The weight is not entirely here in the way it was. The alert can begin to come down. The bracing can begin to ease. Let the body lead when it shows you these things. Follow the softening. Follow the descent of the shoulders. Follow the deeper breath. These are not distractions from the spiritual work. They are the spiritual work expressing itself in the one body you have, the body that I made and that I am reaching into, as well as the spirit. The rest also arrives in the quality of the silence. For a person who has been carrying a great weight, silence is not restful, because silence brings the full weight into awareness without the buffer of activity. The noise and the busyness have been, in part, a way of managing the silence, of keeping the unmediated awareness of the burden at bay. But as the burden is laid down, the silence begins to change character. It becomes less threatening and more hospitable. It begins to carry something, rather than simply amplifying what you are carrying. The silence of the resting person is not empty. It is inhabited. It has a quality of presence in it that the silence of the burdened person does not have. A sense of not being alone in the quiet, of my presence being more perceptible when the noise of the carrying has been reduced. Let yourself be quiet. Not in the way of suppressing what arises, but in the way of a person who has laid something down and is learning to sit in the space where the thing was. That sitting is itself a form of rest. And what inhabits the silence as you sit in it is me. The rest arrives also in the quality of attention you are able to bring to the present moment. One of the most significant practical effects of laying down what you have been carrying is the return of genuine presence to the now. The person who is carrying too much is perpetually pulled between past and future by the burden, rehearsing what happened and anticipating what might happen next in an ongoing internal management of the weight. The present, the actual texturized living moment of right now, is partially unavailable to them because so much of their attention is occupied elsewhere. As the burden is released, the attention that was occupied by the carrying becomes available for the present moment. You begin to notice things you have not been noticing. Small things, the quality of the light at a particular time of day, the specific sound of a familiar voice, the taste of food, the particular texture of a conversation. These things have been there all along. Your attention was not available for them. The return of that attention is rest of a particular and beautiful kind, the rest of a person who is finally able to be where they actually are, and the rest arrives in prayer. The quality of your connection with me changes when what has been occupying the interior is laid down and the interior becomes available for a different kind of engagement. Prayer that has been effortful and one-directional, that has felt like sending messages upward into uncertain reception, begins to have a different quality. Not because I am more present. I am no more present than I have always been, but because you are more present, because the static of the carrying has reduced, and the frequency where my voice speaks is more accessible than it was when the management of the burden was filling it with noise. The prayer of the rested person is quieter and more attentive and more genuinely two-directional than the prayer of the overburdened one. And the prayer of the rested person receives things, hears things, perceives things that the overburdened prayer could not access. Not because they are more spiritually advanced, but because they have more interior space available for the receiving. This is what I am offering you. The rest of the body and the rest of the silence and the rest of the present moment and the rest of the prayer that can finally hear what I am saying. It is not a luxury reserved for people with fewer demands than yours. It is available to you now, specifically, in the particular circumstances of your particular life, beginning with the first genuine act of laying down what has been laid on you too long. You do not have to wait for the right season. You do not have to wait until your circumstances change. The rest is available in the releasing, which is available now, which is what I am offering you in these words, which is yours to take. I want to speak about what I give you in exchange for what you lay down, because the exchange is real and it matters, and understanding it may be part of what makes the laying down feel less like loss and more like what it actually is, which is a trade. Not a trade in which you surrender something and receive nothing. Not a trade in which what you release is simply gone, but a trade in which what leaves your hands is replaced by something that is genuinely better suited to them. What I offer in place of what you have been carrying is not a lighter version of the same burden, not simply a reduction of the weight you have been holding. It is something categorically different in kind. Something that functions differently in the hands and the interior and the daily texture of your life than what it replaces. The first thing I give you in exchange for the burden is my presence without the static. When the burden is laid down, the interior space that it was occupying becomes available for the most significant thing I can offer any of my children, which is simply myself, my direct and unmediated presence in the interior life. Not the presence I was maintaining all along, which I was, but the felt and perceptible presence that becomes accessible when the noise of the carrying is no longer drowning out the frequency on which that presence communicates. The weight has been loud. It has been filling the interior with its demands and its management requirements and its constant, low-grade noise. And underneath that noise, quieter but persistent, I have been speaking. I have been present. And as the noise reduces, what has always been there becomes audible, becomes perceptible, becomes the primary interior reality rather than the background one. The exchange is the burden for my presence, and my presence is worth more than what you are releasing. The second thing I give you in exchange is a different kind of purpose. The carrying, for all its cost, has given you a sense of being needed, a sense of having a clear function, a sense that your existence is justified by what you are holding. When the carrying stops, that particular form of purpose stops with it, and this is one of the reasons the laying down can feel like a loss of identity as well as a relief. But what I give in exchange is a purpose that is not organized around exhaustion, a calling that does not require you to be perpetually depleted in order to fulfill it, a purpose that draws on the gifts I placed in you before the carrying began, the gifts that have been partially available through the years of carrying and that become more fully available as the carrying releases, a purpose that energizes rather than drains, that gives back as much as it takes, that is sustainable across the whole of your life rather than consuming what it draws from until the reservoir runs dry. The exchange is the exhausting purpose of the carrying for the life-giving purpose of the calling. And the calling is worth what the carrying cost. The third thing I give you in exchange is what I have described, in other words, elsewhere, and want to name here specifically, rest. That is not contingent on circumstances. The carrying requires specific conditions in order for any rest to be possible, conditions that are frequently unavailable, which is why the carrying person rarely gets the rest they need. The rest I offer in exchange is built into the laying down itself, available in the act of releasing regardless of whether the circumstances change. The bills are still there. The relationships are still complex. The future is still uncertain. The circumstances that contributed to the carrying have not been magically resolved by the laying down. But the interior relationship to those circumstances has changed, and that change is what makes the rest available independent of the circumstances. The person who has laid down the carrying can rest in a hard season in a way that the person who is carrying everything cannot, because the rest is not a function of how hard the season is, but of who is holding what the season contains. The fourth thing I give you in exchange is my yoke. I want to speak about this specifically because it is the language I used when I invited the burdened and the weary to come to me, and it has been misunderstood. When I say my yoke is easy and my burden is light, I am not saying that following me requires nothing of you, that discipleship is effortless, that the life of faith is without demand. I am saying that what I ask you to carry in partnership with me is proportioned to what I also provide for the carrying of it. A yoke is a carrying device. It does not eliminate the work. It distributes the weight and makes the work possible and sustainable rather than impossible and destructive. When I offer you my yoke, I am not offering you the absence of work. I am offering you a different kind of work that is done in genuine partnership with me, where my strength is available to supplement yours, and where what you are asked to carry is within the range of what that partnership can sustain. The exchange is the burden that has been breaking you for the yoke that will not, the weight that has been depleting you for the load that is proportioned to what partnership with me can hold. That exchange is available now, in this moment, in the laying down. Support this ministry through the link given below. Your support makes it possible for these words to reach the ones who are most in need of the exchange they describe. Yuaskan Daya, your Seft. I want to speak now about who you are when you are no longer primarily defined by what you carry, because this is one of the most significant and most surprising discoveries that waits on the other side of the laying down. The identity question is real. When the carrying has been the organizing principle of the self for a long time, when who you are has been substantially shaped by the role of the one who holds, who you are without the holding is a genuine and sometimes disorienting question. And I want to help you begin to answer it, not by describing a generic version of the healed person, but by pointing you toward what has been present in you all along underneath the weight that covered it. The carrying, whatever its specific content, has been functioning as a kind of overlay on the self. It has been sitting on top of who you actually are, covering some things, distorting others, making certain qualities of your original self less visible and less accessible than they were designed to be. The person you are underneath the carrying is not a stranger or a construction or something that needs to be invented from scratch. They are the you that existed before the weight came, or more precisely, they are the continuation of that person. Now with the depth and the wisdom that the years of carrying produced, but without the distortion that the carrying imposed on everything it touched. What tends to emerge first as the carrying releases is the particular quality of lightness that belongs to your specific self. Not lightness in the sense of frivolity, not the lightness of someone who has never been through anything, but the specific quality of ease and openness that is natural to your particular person when it is not under the pressure of the weight. Some people discover humor that has been compressed by the gravity of the carrying, a capacity for laughter that is not performed for the comfort of others, but genuinely felt, arising naturally from an interior that is no longer fully occupied by the management of the burden. Some people discover curiosity, a genuine interest in the world and in the people in it that has been suppressed by the carrying's demand for all available attention. Some people discover creativity, the capacity to make and build and imagine, that requires a certain quality of interior freedom that the carrying was preventing. These qualities are not new. They are the returning of what was always yours. What also emerges is a different quality of compassion. Not the compassion of the overburdened person who helps from depletion, who gives what they do not have, and then wonders why the giving leaves them more empty than before, but the compassion of a person who has been genuinely rested, who has received rather than only given, who has been in the posture of the helped as well as the helper, and who therefore gives from a place of genuine fullness rather than from the anxious impulse to be needed. This compassion is more sustainable and more genuinely effective than the compassion of the overtaxed, because it comes from abundance rather than from the fear of being inadequate if it stops. The compassion that emerges after the laying down is one of the most significant gifts that the healed person carries back into the world, and it is more powerful for having been rested than it ever was when it was running on empty. What also becomes visible is desire. Real desire, the genuine wanting of specific things, that has been suppressed by the carrying in ways you may not have fully noticed. When the primary interior occupation is the management of what you are carrying, there is limited bandwidth left for the honest acknowledgement of what you yourself want, what you yourself need, what you yourself hope for. Those desires, when unacknowledged, do not disappear. They go underground and wait, sometimes emerging sideways in forms that are not clearly recognizable as desire, sometimes simply creating a low-grade sense of deprivation that you cannot name. As the carrying releases, the desires begin to surface. Some of them will be familiar. The longings you have always known about but have not given yourself permission to pursue. Some of them will surprise you, desires that you did not know were present, that the weight was covering. Let them surface. Let them be named. Desire is not selfishness. It is information about who you are and what you were made for. And I am interested in your desires because I placed many of them there, and because they are part of the picture of the purpose I have for your life. And what becomes visible is your own voice, not the voice that speaks for the carrying, that advocates for the management of the burden, that communicates the needs of everything else you are holding. Your actual voice, the one that says what you actually think and feel and believe and want, the one that has been partially silenced by the need to be who the carrying required you to be. That voice has things to say. I want to hear it. The people who love you most want to hear it, and it will begin to speak more freely as the carrying releases, not all at once, but gradually, as the interior becomes a more hospitable environment for honest self-expression, as the weight that required you to manage yourself so carefully lifts and leaves more room for the spontaneous and genuine expression of who you actually are. This is what is waiting underneath the carrying, not a diminished self that was compressed by the weight, but a real and full self that was covered by it. And the uncovering, which is what the laying down makes possible, is not an excavation of something unfamiliar. It is a homecoming. It is the returning to yourself of what has always been there, the restoration of access to the person I made when I made you, the person I have been waiting to meet more fully as the weight that covered them is finally, gratefully, laid down. I want to speak about what happens to your relationships as you lay down what you have been carrying, because the relationships in your life have been shaped by the carrying in ways that will begin to shift as the carrying releases, and I want to prepare you for those shifts so that you can move through them with understanding rather than alarm. The relational changes that follow the laying down are among the most significant and sometimes the most disorienting dimensions of the whole process. Because the people who have organized their relationship with you around the version of you that was carrying the weight will need to adjust to a version of you that is not. And adjustment takes time and can produce its own friction before it produces the deeper connection it is ultimately moving toward. The most immediate relational shift is the change in what you are able to offer. The person who has been carrying too much has been present in their relationships in a particular way, a way that was shaped by the carrying. They have been the strong one, the reliable one, the one who manages and solves and holds together. And that role, while it was genuinely motivated by love, was also a form of distance, a way of being in relationship that kept the one carrying in a position of giving rather than receiving, managing rather than inhabiting, being useful rather than being known. As the carrying releases, the distance that role required begins to close. You become more available, not just more available in the sense of having more time and energy, but more available in the sense of being genuinely present, genuinely open, genuinely there, in a way that the person who is always slightly occupied with what they are holding cannot fully be. The people who love you will notice this change. Some of them will welcome it immediately. Some of them will find it disorienting because they had organized their relationship with you around the role you were playing, and the new version of the relationship will require them to adjust. There is also a shift in the dynamics of mutual care. The person who has been the primary giver in their relationships has often, without realizing it, trained the people around them out of the habit of giving in return, because the giver was always already handling everything before anyone else needed to step in, because the giver communicated, however unintentionally, that they did not need what was being offered, because the giver deflected care so consistently that the people around them stopped offering it. As the giving from depletion releases and the genuine receiving becomes possible, some of the people in your life will step naturally into the space that opens up, will offer what they have always wanted to offer and have not been allowed to. Others will be uncertain, will need the explicit invitation rather than the assumed availability, will need to be told that the dynamic is changing and that their care is welcome in ways it was not previously received. Have those conversations where they are needed. Let the people who love you know that the version of you who deflected everything is giving way to a version who can actually be reached, actually helped, actually held in return for all the holding you have done. I also want to speak about the relationships that may not survive the laying down, or that may change so significantly that they feel like different relationships in their new form. Some of what has organized your relational world has been the carrying itself. Mage, the relationships that were primarily built around shared burden, around the dynamic of you carrying and others depending on your carrying, around the particular kind of connection that exists between a person who manages and the people who are managed, those relationships will necessarily shift as the managing releases. Some of them will deepen into something more genuinely mutual as the artificial structure of the managing is removed. Some of them will reveal that the connection was primarily about the function you were serving rather than about you as a person, and the revelation of that, while painful, is information worth having. And some of them will simply evolve into new forms that are more honest and more sustainable than what they were when the carrying was organizing them. The people I am bringing into your life, as the carrying releases, are people who are suited to the version of you that is emerging. People who are drawn to the real you, rather than to the role you were playing. People who can meet you in the mutual and genuine exchange of love and presence that the carrying was preventing. These people are coming. I have been preparing them for you and you for them, and the connection you will have with them will feel different from what you have known. Different in the way that genuine connection always feels different from managed connection, more restful and more nourishing, and more capable of sustaining itself without the effort that one-directional giving always eventually requires. And there is something I want to say about your relationship with yourself in the relational context, because the laying down changes not only how you relate to others, but how you relate to yourself in the presence of others. The self-monitoring that the carrying required, the constant assessment of how you are coming across, and whether you are being adequate, and whether the people around you are managing, and whether you need to adjust something about yourself or your behavior to keep everything running smoothly, that self-monitoring begins to quiet as the carrying releases. You begin to be less preoccupied with your own performance and relationship and more genuinely interested in the person in front of you. But you begin to arrive in conversations less as a manager and more as a participant. You begin to find that the relationships in your life become less effortful as the effort that was going into the carrying becomes available for the genuine and spontaneous engagement that is the natural mode of a person who is not simultaneously running the management operations of a burden. That is the gift of the laying down in the relational dimension. Not better relationships through technique or effort. Better relationships through presence. And presence is what the laying down restores. I want to speak about purpose now, about what becomes available and what becomes visible when the hands that have been full of what you have been carrying are finally freed to hold what I have been preparing for them. Because the laying down is not the end of something. It is the beginning of something, and what it is the beginning of is the specific life I designed you for, the life that has been partially available through the years of carrying and that becomes more fully available as the carrying releases. Your purpose has not been canceled by the weight. It has been waiting. And as the weight lifts, what has been waiting comes into clearer view. The first thing I want to say about purpose in this context is that the years of carrying are not wasted years in relation to the purpose. I know there is a temptation to feel, as the carrying releases, that the time spent inside it was time taken from something more important, that the life you are meant to live has been delayed or diminished by the burden. But I work differently than that. I do not have a plan for your life that was designed for optimal conditions and that gets ruined by the presence of difficulty. I have a plan for your actual life, the one that includes what you have been through and what you have carried and what it has formed in you. And that plan is not in spite of the carrying, but through it. The years of carrying have been forming something in you that is directly relevant to the specific purpose I have for you. The depth of your compassion, the specific quality of your understanding of what it means to be weighed down, the hard-won wisdom about what sustains a person through the long seasons of difficult carrying, these are not incidental to your purpose. They are central to it. Because here is what your purpose includes. The people who are still in the middle of what you are coming out of. The ones who are carrying what you have carried, who are under the weight you have been under, who do not yet know the permission I am giving you today, who have not yet heard someone say with the authority of having been there, that it is possible to lay it down, that there is someone to lay it down to, that the hands on the other side of the releasing are strong enough and trustworthy enough to hold what is released. Those people need a witness who knows the weight from the inside, who does not speak about it from the comfortable distance of someone who has never been there, who can say, I know what this is because I have been here, and I know that you are stronger than you think, and I know that the laying down is possible, and I know the one who receives what you release, and I can tell you from my own experience that he is trustworthy. That witness is yours, not after you are fully healed, not from the platform of complete arrival at the other side, but now, in the process, in the honest middle of the journey from carrying to release. You are already qualified to speak to people who are one step behind you, and as you continue through the laying down, the qualification grows. There is also purpose available to you that has nothing to do with the wound or the carrying. Purpose that is simply about the specific gifts and inclinations and capacities that I placed in you when I made you, that have been partially suppressed by the carrying's demands on your energy and attention, and have been waiting for the space that the releasing creates. Things you are naturally drawn toward, things you are naturally good at, things that produce in you the particular quality of aliveness that arises when a person is doing what they were made to do. The carrying has been consuming the resources that those things require, and as the carrying releases, those resources become available for the things I always intended them to be used for. Pay attention to what comes alive in you as the releasing progresses. Pay attention to what you find yourself wanting to do, wanting to build, wanting to create, wanting to pursue. That has been on the far side of the carrying's demands. Those stirrings are not distractions. They are the purpose beginning to breathe again. And I want to say something about timing, because the emergence of purpose after a season of heavy carrying often produces a particular kind of urgency, a feeling that there is much to catch up on, much time to make up for, much ground to recover that was lost to the carrying. I want to speak to that urgency gently and directly. The timing of your purpose is in my hands, and always has been. Nothing that was supposed to happen in your life has been permanently missed. Nothing that I intended for you has passed its expiration date. The specific windows of opportunity that I open are not closed by the carrying any more than the sunrise is canceled by a cloudy morning. The sun rises regardless of the clouds, and what I have for you comes at the right time regardless of what preceded it, because my timing is not a rigid schedule that is disrupted by the messiness of real human lives. It is a living and responsive movement toward what I have always intended, and it accounts for everything that has happened to you, and everything you have carried, and everything that is now being released. Go into the purpose I have for you with open hands, not grasping after what you feel you missed, not racing to make up for lost time in ways that recreate the exhaustion of the carrying in a different form, but moving with the pace of a person who has laid down the weight and is learning what it feels like to walk without it, curious and open and available to what each day brings, trusting that I am leading the pace and that the pace is sufficient. The purpose is real. It is coming. It is already partially here in the wisdom and the depth and the compassion that the carrying has formed. And it is growing, becoming more fully itself, exactly in proportion to the releasing that is making room for it. I want to give you something practical to carry into the days ahead, and I am aware of the particular irony of using the word carry in a message about laying things down. What I mean is this. I want to give you a set of daily orientations, small and repeatable practices that cooperate with the laying down and the ordinary texture of your days, and that gradually make the posture of release more natural and more habitual than the posture of carrying has been. Because the laying down we have been talking about is not a one-time event. It is a daily choosing, and the daily choosing is easier when it has some practical structure to move within. The first daily practice is the morning inventory. Before the day takes hold, before the demands arrive and the forward motion begins, take one quiet moment to notice what you are reaching for. Not what the day requires of you, not what is on the list, but what from the interior you are instinctively picking up to carry into the day. The old worry, the familiar weight, the responsibility that belongs to someone else or to me, that your hands have automatically reached for upon waking. Name what you find. Simply and honestly, without judgment, I am reaching for this today. And in the choosing, I am laying this down, not as a performance of spiritual discipline, but as the genuine daily decision to place in my hands what you have just identified in yours. That moment, 30 seconds of honest noticing followed by 30 seconds of genuine releasing, practiced consistently, begins to change the morning. Not immediately, not without the old habits reasserting themselves, but gradually over the accumulation of mornings, the posture of the day begins to change, because the posture of the morning has changed. The second daily practice is the midday check. The carrying tends to creep back in through the middle of the day, not dramatically but gradually, through the small decisions and the small worries and the small managements that accumulate, until by the afternoon you are carrying something close to the full weight you laid down in the morning. A midday moment of noticing, brief and without self-condemnation. Simply, what have I picked back up since this morning? And a brief recommitting to the laying down of whatever has been resumed. This does not have to be a formal interruption of the day. It can happen in a transition moment, the movement between one task and the next, the walk from one room to another, the few seconds before a meeting begins. Simply, I notice I am carrying this again. I am choosing to lay it down again, and then continuing with the day from a slightly lighter interior. The third daily practice is the conscious receiving. Once each day, make a deliberate attempt to receive something without deflecting it. A compliment received rather than dismissed, care offered by someone and actually accepted rather than minimized and returned. A moment of beauty or goodness that is stayed with rather than immediately moved past. A moment of my presence, a quality of quiet or a thought that carries something of me that is sat with rather than allowed to pass unacknowledged. The person who has been a carrier tends to be a poor receiver because the orientation toward giving is so established that receiving feels uncomfortable and wrong and in need of being quickly balanced. Practicing the small daily act of receiving is the antidote to that imbalance. It is the training of the interior toward the posture of the open hand rather than the full one. And the small daily practice of receiving gradually makes the larger receiving, the receiving of what I am building in the space the laying down creates, more accessible. The fourth daily practice is the evening surrender. At the end of the day, before sleep, a deliberate and conscious releasing of the day's weight. Not a review of everything that happened, not a rehearsal of the worries and the unresolved items and the things that still need to be managed. A releasing. Something as simple as, I am done carrying today. Whatever I picked up today that was not mine to carry, I am putting it down now. Whatever belongs to you, I am returning it to you. I am going to sleep without the weight, trusting that what needs to be held overnight is held by you, and that I will face whatever tomorrow brings when tomorrow comes, rather than carrying it through the night. The evening surrender is one of the most practically significant practices in this list, because the quality of sleep, as we have talked about, is directly affected by whether the body and the interior are genuinely released at the end of the day, or whether they maintain the carrying through the night. The consistent practice of the evening surrender gradually changes the quality of rest available in the night hours. The fifth daily practice is gratitude specifically for the laying down. Not general gratitude, not the generic acknowledgement of blessings, but the specific noticing and naming of what is different because of the laying down. The morning that felt slightly less heavy than it used to. The conversation where you were more present than you would have been. The moment of genuine rest that happened without you forcing it. The prayer that felt less effortful and more mutual. The small evidence of change that is real and worth acknowledging and honoring because it is the visible surface of what is happening underneath. The gradual accumulation of released weight, producing a different quality of life. Noticing these things and naming them, even briefly and internally, builds the faith and the motivation that sustain the practice through the harder days when the change seems less visible. The gratitude for evidence of the laying down is itself a practice of the laying down. It is the choosing to attend to what is being freed rather than to what is still being held. And the sixth practice, the one that underlies all the others, is the daily returning to me. Not as a program, not as a discipline performed for its own sake, but as the genuine, repeated choosing of my company over the solitary management of everything that wants to be managed. The daily turning toward me is the environment in which all the other practices are possible and in which the laying down that this message is about is ultimately sustained. Come to me daily, not only when the weight is unbearable, not only when the crisis requires it, daily, in the ordinary moments, in the manageable days as much as in the hard ones. Let the daily returning become the primary habit that replaces the daily carrying. That replacement, slowly and imperfectly made over the accumulation of many days, is the transformation of the interior that everything else in this message is pointing toward. Support this ministry through the link given below. These words exist to give people practical ground to stand on as they learn the daily work of laying down what they have carried too long. I want to give you a picture of what is ahead, not as a distant and uncertain hope, but as a genuine description of what becomes available as the laying down takes hold and the life on the other side of the carrying begins to reveal itself. You need to know what you are moving toward. The daily work of choosing to lay down what your hands reflexively reach for is easier when there is a clear and honest picture of the life that the laying down is producing, something real to move toward rather than simply something heavy to move away from. Let me show you what I see when I look at the you who is emerging through this process. What is ahead is mornings that begin differently. Not mornings without their own ordinary challenges. Not mornings exempt from the natural demands of a life being lived, but mornings where the first interior note is not the settling of the familiar weight. where the waking does not immediately activate the carrying, where the body has actually rested through the night because the nervous system was not on watch, where the opening of the eyes is followed by a moment, even a brief one, of something that might be called lightness, the sense of a day that is beginning without the predetermined heaviness that the carrying attached to every morning for so long. That morning is coming. Not all at once, not without the backward steps and the re-carrying that are part of the process. But it is coming, one morning at a time, built from the accumulation of the evening surrenders and the morning inventories and the daily choosing of release over holding. The morning that does not begin with the weight is one of the most ordinary and most extraordinary gifts available to the person who has laid down what was pressing them. What is ahead is the return of lightness in the body. The shoulders that have been living slightly elevated, braced against the carrying, beginning to descend to where they were always meant to rest. The jaw softening, the chest opening to a depth of breath that has not been available while it was contracted around what it was holding. The fatigue that has not responded to sleep beginning, slowly and incrementally, to lift as the internal burden that was producing it is released, and the body no longer needs to expend the ongoing energy of the carrying. The physical relief of the laying down is real, and it is significant, and it is one of the most tangible and immediate ways that the releasing registers in the actual lived experience of a person who has genuinely put something down. Let your body tell you when something has shifted. Let the physical ease be evidence of the spiritual work. They are not separate. What is ahead is the capacity to be genuinely present with the people you love. Not the partial presence of the person who is managing and monitoring and carrying while simultaneously engaging with the people in front of them, but the full presence of a person whose interior is not fully occupied elsewhere, who can give the actual undivided attention that genuine connection requires, who can be curious about the specific person they are with rather than preoccupied with the logistics of the carrying. The relationships in your life will feel different when you are fully present in them. The conversations will go deeper. The love you feel will be more expressible and more receivable. The quality of connection will shift from managed to genuine in ways that will surprise you with how much difference there is between the two. That quality of presence is coming. It is being produced right now by the laying down that is already beginning. What is ahead is the specific life I have been holding for you through all the years of the carrying. I want to say that plainly because I want you to understand that the laying down is not a relinquishing of your life. It is the receiving of it. The life you have been living while carrying has been a real and valuable life, but it has been a partial life, a life conducted under the pressure of what was being held, and the life available to you when the holding releases is more fully itself, more fully aligned with who you actually are and what I actually have for you, than what has been available while the carrying was the primary interior occupation. That life includes specific purposes I have been shaping, specific relationships I have been preparing, specific experiences of joy and meaning and genuine contribution that require the version of you who is not primarily occupied with carrying. Those things are real. They are coming. They are already beginning to be visible at the edges of what the laying down is opening up. What is ahead is a different quality of faith. Not the faith of the overburdened person who comes to me primarily in crisis. Not the faith that is organized around the desperate management of what is too heavy, and I declare it addressed at its source. The tiredness that sleep has not cured, the depletion that activity has not replenished, the fatigue that comes not from insufficient rest, but from the ongoing energy expenditure of the carrying. I am reaching into the source of it. As the carrying releases, the energy that was being consumed by the holding becomes available again. I am restoring what was depleted. Not all at once, but genuinely, incrementally, in proportion to the releasing. The resources that the carrying consumed are being returned to the person they belong to. I speak to the people this person has been carrying, and I declare that I receive each one of them, by name known to me, held in my awareness, with a completeness that exceeds what this person's carrying could provide. I am not leaving them without care as they are released from these hands. I am receiving them into mine. I am the God who is capable of caring for each one simultaneously, with full attention, with full love, without the depletion that human carrying always eventually produces. To the person being released, come to me. The one who is carrying you loves you, and the releasing of you is an act of love that trusts me with what they cannot indefinitely sustain. Come to me directly. I have been waiting for you. I speak to the shame that has been part of the carrying. The shame about still struggling, about still carrying, about not having laid it down sooner, about the ways the carrying has affected the people around this person. I declare that shame has no authority in this moment. The carrying was done from love and from faithfulness and from the absence of an available alternative, not from weakness or failure. I do not look at this person's years of carrying and see someone who fell short. I see someone who gave what they had and kept giving past the point of having more to give, and the honoring of that faithfulness is not shame, it is tenderness. It is my specific and personal gratitude for the love that the carrying represented, even as I release them from the requirement to continue it. I speak to the fear of what comes after the laying down, the fear of the emptiness, the fear of the unknown self, the fear that without the weight, there will not be enough left to constitute a person of substance and purpose. I declare that what remains after the laying down is more than what was there before the carrying began, because the carrying, while it was taking, was also forming, and the depth and the wisdom and the compassion that were forged in the carrying remain as gifts, even as the burden itself is released. The hands that are freed are not empty. They are available. And I am filling them with what I have been preparing for exactly this moment, exactly this person, exactly the version of them that is emerging as the weight is laid down. I speak to the future of this person, and I declare it genuinely good. Not the future they have been imagining through the lens of the carrying, the future filtered through the exhaustion and the limitation and the reduced horizon that too much weight for too long produces. The actual future, the one I see from where I stand, which is forward of where they are standing, which includes what they cannot yet see, which is shaped by what is being built in the space the releasing is creating. That future is good. It contains rest and purpose and genuine connection, and the specific joy of a person who has put down what was not designed for their hands and discovered what was. I declare that future available, moving toward them even now, advancing in proportion to each act of releasing, arriving incrementally in the mornings that begin differently, and the relationships that deepen, and the prayers that become more mutual, and the body that begins to unknot itself from the long-held tension of the carrying. And over everything I declare, my presence, the specific, personal, unwavering presence of the one who has been with this person through every moment of every season of the carrying, and who is with them now in the laying down, and who will be with them in every step of what comes after. I am not leaving. I have never left. The aloneness of the carrying was the aloneness of not perceiving my presence, not the aloneness of my actual absence. I was there. I am here. I will be there. And what this person is releasing is being received by someone who is entirely equal to the holding of it, and entirely committed to the transformation of it, and entirely in love with the person who has finally, faithfully, gratefully opened their hands. Support this ministry through the link given below. Every person reached by these words is someone putting down what they were never meant to carry alone, and your generosity makes that reaching possible. We have come to the end of this time together, and I want to close not with a summary of what has been said, but with ascending. Ascending of you forward into the rest of your day and your week and your life, with the specific weight of this message still active in you, still working in the interior places it was aimed at, still doing what it was sent to do long after the reading of it ends. Because this message was not written to inform you about the laying down. It was written to produce it, to be itself an act of the laying down, to create in the receiving of it the actual interior conditions for the releasing we have been talking about. And if something has shifted in you through these words, however slightly, however tentatively, that shifting is real, and it is the beginning of something that I intend to sustain. You came to these words carrying something. You may be leaving them still carrying it in many ways, still holding much of what was in your arms when you arrived, because the laying down is not completed in a single reading of a single message, however long and however honest it has been. But I want you to notice whether something is different about how you are carrying it now, whether the weight feels slightly more acknowledged, slightly more honestly seen for what it is, whether the permission to put it down feels slightly more real than it did before, whether the invitation to bring it to me feels slightly more accessible, slightly less theoretical, slightly more like something that can actually be done in the real texture of your actual life. If any of that is true, something has happened here that is worth honoring rather than dismissing because it is not yet complete. I want to give you one sentence to carry from this time, one thing to return to when the day is hard, and the carrying resumes and the weight that you laid down in the moment of reading this reasserts itself in the morning hours. The sentence is this: I have carried it long enough, and I am laying it down now. Not a declaration of completion, not a claim that the releasing is finished or the weight is gone, but a statement of direction and intention, a reorientation toward the laying down that can be made as many times as necessary, in as many moments as the reaching back requires a response. In the morning, when the weight settles back in before you are fully awake, I have carried it long enough, and I am laying it down now. In the middle of the day, when the old management impulse reaches for what was released, I have carried it long enough, and I am laying it down now. In the night, when the vigilance that should have rested is instead running its old programs, I have carried it long enough, and I am laying it down now. That sentence is a door, and every time you speak it, you are walking through the door again, returning to the direction you have chosen, recommitting to the posture of the open hand. I want to say something about the people who will see you changing. Because as the laying down takes hold, as the weight gradually releases, and the person underneath the carrying becomes more visible and more present and more freely themselves, the people around you will notice something different. They may not be able to name what is different. They may simply say you seem lighter, or you seem more yourself, or something has changed about you, and I cannot identify what it is. Let them notice. Let the change be visible. You do not need to explain it or narrate it or make it palatable for the people who preferred the version of you that was organized around the carrying. The change is good, and it is real, and it is mine, and it does not require apology or explanation. It requires only your permission to continue, your daily choosing of the laying down over the resumption of the weight, your willingness to keep walking in the direction you have turned. I also want to say this, plainly and as a closing word: I am proud of you. Not proud in the sense that requires your performance to continue in order to sustain the pride. Proud in the sense of the parent who looks at a child who has been through something genuinely hard and has kept going and has finally arrived at the moment of receiving help and says, I see what this took. I see what you have been through. I see the faithfulness and the love and the endurance that kept you carrying past the point where the carrying was sustainable. And I am glad you are here. I am glad you have arrived at this moment. I am glad you are willing to receive these words. And I am fully committed to everything that comes next, to the laying down and the rebuilding and the restoring and the filling of the open hands with what they were always meant to hold. Go forward from here with your hands slightly more open than they were. Go forward knowing that what you release does not fall into nothing, but into the hands that were always waiting to receive it. Go forward knowing that the self who exists on the other side of the carrying is not a diminished self, but an expanded one, not a self without substance, but a self with more of its true substance available than has been accessible while the weight was pressing it down. Go forward knowing that I am with you in every step of this, not as an observer or a commentator, but as the active and loving and fully present companion of the journey, the one who receives what is laid down and who builds in the space the laying down creates, and who has been preparing what comes next since before you began carrying what you are now releasing. You have carried it long enough. It is time to lay it down. And I am here. I have always been here, and I am not going anywhere. Support this ministry through the link given below. You were found by these words today. There are others still carrying who have not yet been found. Your generosity sends these words to them.